Okay, good evening, buenas noches. Welcome to our today's community town hall. Before I continue, I just want to say a few words in Spanish. Este foro virtual se llevará a cabo en inglés, pero si tienen preguntas en español o quieren poner sus comentarios en español, lo pueden hacer. Vamos a tener una presentación especial sobre el censo, que estamos a horas de que eso se complete. Y Amit, que está aquí, él también dará esa presentación en español. Así que espero que se puedan quedar y escuchar esta conversación y la información que vamos a compartir. Okay, thank you all for joining and for giving me a moment to share some words in Spanish. Today's Community Town Hall is the latest in our series to provide families in the Safer College program with resources and information, as well as an opportunity to connect and share expertise to support each other. As many of you know, the NYC Kids Rise Safer College program provides a way for all of us, families, schools, neighbors, and partners throughout the city to work together to build a financial foundation for students' educational future. I'm Carolina Valencia, Director of Communications and Digital for NYC Kids Rise, and I am thrilled to welcome parents and experts to share how to stay financially healthy in these hard times. They will also share their expertise on how to balance bills, spending, saving, and other financial priorities. Joining us are Jeanette Adine, Senior Financial Counselor at Urban Upbound, Jess Brooks, Assistant Director of Financial Counseling and Coaching Programs at the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, Nadia Landi, Astoria Elementary School mom, Patricia Roberts, also a mom, education savings advocate, 529 expert, and also the author of newly launched book, Route 529, A Parent's Guide to Saving for College and Career Training with 529 Plans. Before we start the discussion, here with us is also the Deputy Director from New York City Census 2020, Amit Singh Baga, who will share updated information about the census and why it's important we are all counted with only hours left. Amit, welcome. And let me know if whenever I should start sharing your slides. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Carolina, for having me here today and for allowing me for a few minutes to talk about the census, which is so critically important to the future of New York City. You can go ahead and start sharing the slides now.
Okay, let's do that.
Before I start, I also want to just express a warm hello to Jess Brooks, who's one of your panelists this evening. She and I are former colleagues. She's truly tremendous, and I'm very honored and pleased to be on a panel with her. For those of you who have heard about the census, you will know that the census is a count of every single person in the United States that happens once every 10 years. And I'm here to talk to you about the census today because as of this moment, literally as of just 3 minutes ago, we only have 12 hours left until this very, very important exercise is finished. The Supreme Court of the United States decided this week that the census was going to be cut short by 2 weeks. And so as a result, we have no time left to ensure that every single New Yorker has participated in this very, very important exercise. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's so important, particularly for those of us who are fighting for a bigger and better future for ourselves and our families. So the census, as I mentioned, is a count of every single person in the United States. It happens once every 10 years, and it's happened once every 10 years since 1790, essentially the founding of our nation. Many people have heard about the census. Some people have not heard about the census. I hope all of you have already completed it. If you haven't, I'll tell you how to do so in a minute. But sometimes it's not always clear why the census is so incredibly important to us and to all of our communities. Well, simply put, the census means money, power, and respect for us. $1.5 trillion, that's trillion with a T, that the federal government distributes every single year for schools, for hospitals, for housing, for transportation, the subways, roads, bridges, health clinics, health insurance, any type of program you can imagine. Our fair share of $1.5 trillion is on the line every single year based on the census. Basically, the more of us who fill out the census, the more money we get from the federal government for the programs and services we all rely on. Number two, power. The census is the basis on which all 435 seats in the House of Representatives, which, as I'm sure everyone knows, is the lower house of Congress in Washington, D.C., it is the basis on which those seats are distributed. That is a fixed number, 435. That doesn't change. And every 10 years, the distribution of those seats changes between the states. In theory, states that have gained population will gain more seats, and states that have lost population will lose seats. Now, that seems pretty simple and straightforward, but it becomes a problem when you think about the reality that in some states, you may not have a complete and accurate count of the actual population. Historically speaking, states that are wealthier and whiter tend to have a much more complete count, closer to 90 to 100% of their populations are counted in every census. And states like New York or California, even Florida, and in particular, very diverse cities like ours, where people have a lot of reason to sometimes be afraid of this federal government process, we don't often have a complete count. And so when we're fighting for our fair share of those seats in Congress, those members of Congress who are fighting for us in Washington, fighting for the Paycheck Protection Program, fighting for small business relief, fighting for extended unemployment benefits, if we don't participate in the census, those people that are fighting for us in Washington, we're going to lose those seats. And based on current estimates, we could lose up to 2 seats here in New York if we don't have a complete count in this census. So it's really critically important that every single New Yorker participates. The same thing is true not just for the number of seats we have in Washington, but also for the number of seats we have in the State House in Albany. Albany is actually where very important decisions about our futures are made every day. Whether or not we have continued rent control, whether or not we have certain types of continued unemployment benefits, whether or not what the limits are for income limits when it comes to how we get public benefits, whether or not we end up taxing the rich and reducing taxes on the middle class and the poor. All of those decisions are not made here at City Hall, they're actually made in Albany. And so New York City really needs its fair share of fighters in Albany as well to ensure that our communities really benefit from the policies that we know are important to enact to ensure that we have a stable future. And then lastly, the census is really about respect. By showing up in the census, by proudly declaring this is who we are, this is how many people live in our household, this is our racial background, this is our ethnic background, we are proudly declaring that we are here and we matter. And all of these important decisions about money and about power, they cannot be made without us, because these are decisions that are ultimately about us. They're about our lives, our families, our neighborhoods, our communities, our children. And when we don't participate in the census, when we don't demonstrate the true diversity of our city, the true racial diversity of the city, the ethnic diversity of the city, the linguistic diversity of the city, we are essentially taking ourselves out of the process and out of the game when it comes to how this money and power are really distributed. So the census, it really forms the basis of the respect that we demand for ourselves so that we can build a better future. Now, this year, the census has faced more obstacles than it has in almost 100 years. This has been a year of a true emergency with the census. The census has been attacked constantly and relentlessly by President Trump, and that's because he knows that it is in fact the basis of the money, power, and respect that each of our communities, and our diverse communities in particular, really rely on. And so, the Trump administration attempted to add a question about citizenship to the census. Wouldn't have resulted in anyone being harmed in any way, but he knew that the point was to sow fear and sow confusion. Fortunately, we, the city of New York, we took him all the way up to the Supreme Court. We won our case, and the citizenship question was struck from the census. But really, he's tried every trick in the book to not get communities of color to participate, not get immigrants in particular to participate. And that's really designed to rob us of what is rightfully guaranteed to us in the Constitution, because the census is actually found in the Constitution. And so what happens when you have an incomplete count is that you have an undercount of immigrant groups and other historically undercounted populations, and that undercount results in us getting less money for our communities and us having a loss of our political power. So we have a lot of work left to do here in New York City in the next 12 hours. Currently, our self-response rate, so the percentage of households in New York City that went online or picked up the phone or mailed in their form and responded to the census, that percentage is 61.6%. That isn't close to 100%. Now, there is an additional 20 or 25% of people who have been counted through the door knocking process because the Census Bureau sent out their door knockers. But we still know we have lots of New Yorkers, particularly in our immigrant neighborhoods, who really have not been counted yet because they're maybe afraid or they haven't been connected to the right resources. And we're here to tell you that the census is completely safe. There are absolutely no questions about immigration or citizenship. There are no questions about Social Security or your income. It's 10 simple questions that simply asks how many people live in your household, what their ages are, whether or not you own or rent, and that's about it. It could not be easier or simpler to do. You can go to my2020census.gov, and I'll put that link on the screen in just a minute. Or you can also call 844-330-2020. That's 844-330-2020, and complete your census until midnight tonight by phone or 6 a.m. tomorrow morning online. This map gives you a sense of how New York City is doing in the census. The map itself is a little bit outdated, but the numbers are correct. As you can see here in New York City, our 61.6% is just a little bit behind the nation this year. We're just about 5 points behind. This is very, very important. We've actually had a tremendous amount of success with our campaign this year in getting New York City to this number, which is essentially the same as our 2010 number, which we were not expected to hit, particularly once COVID became a problem here in New York City. But our campaign has been a $40 million investment in which we've worked with more than 160 community groups across the city. We've poured a lot of resources, a lot of money, and a lot of time locally into local organizations to help local organizations organize locally in linguistically and culturally competent ways, because we know that, that is really that is how people really get information through trusted sources. And what we've been able to accomplish is that we've actually now this year come out ahead of almost every major city in America. We are ahead of Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, Boston, Philadelphia, Detroit, Orlando, Miami, Atlanta. And this is really as a result of this very unique and unprecedented government and community partnership. As I was saying, the census is completely easy. It is safe and it is confidential. It's 10 simple questions that can be answered in under 10 minutes. And your answers cannot be shared with anyone. The census is protected by the strongest federal privacy law that exists on the books. And that information cannot be shared with immigration authorities, not with tax authorities, not with the DOB, not with your landlord, not even with the CIA or FBI. Since these protections were passed into law in 1953, the law has never been broken. And there is a real incentive here for Census Bureau employees to comply with this law, because anyone who breaks this law faces $250,000 in fines and up to 5 years in prison. So the penalties are really very severe. And this law has been designed this way to ensure that the census process is as safe and secure as possible, and that each and every single one of you can feel completely safe and secure in participating in the census. So as I was saying, if you have not filled out the census yet, we strongly encourage you to go online right now. You can quickly do it on the side while you're participating in this conversation, or you can do it right after the conversation's done. My2020census.gov, 844-330-2020. There are also several other phone lines in which the census is available. If you go to nyc.gov/census, you can see that full list. And you can respond to the census in Spanish. The website and the phone number are both available in Spanish. And if you have already completed the census, let me just say, there is no time like the present to quickly text 5 of your friends and say, look, today is the very, very last day. We just have 12 hours left to do this. Let's not leave money on the table for New York City and for New York City's families. Let's not leave power on the table. I know we are all very concerned about the state of our country right in this moment, and we have a very important election coming up. And as I say to everyone, that is a very important election, but the result of that election is only going to last 4 years, whereas the result of this census is going to last 10 years. So if we don't have a complete census and we lose money, we don't lose money just this year, we lose it for the next 10. And if we lose seats in Congress, we don't lose those seats in Congress just for tomorrow, we lose them for the next 10. So it's very, very important that we all do our part and quickly participate in the census. I'm now going to speak just a few brief remarks, share a few brief remarks in Spanish.
Just one moment, Amit. So for folks that have any questions, the urgency to complete this, and I hope many of you have already, feel free to comment. We're reading your comments and questions, so put them so that Amit can respond to them. And we're going to just for a few minutes share this information in Spanish. Vamos a compartir esto en español. Do you want to show the slides? You want to continue showing the slides, Amit?
I will just show this one. The one with the link and the phone number.
Okay, we put it in the chat too. So just make it full screen because I think it would be good to show you speaking.
So you would like me to make it full screen?
Yeah, I'm gonna. We'll show it in the banner and in the and on the chat. So I'm gonna just show. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. Buenas tardes. Me llamo Amit Singh Baga y yo soy Deputy Director de NYC Census 2020, la oficina del censo en la oficina de alcalde, Mayor Bill de Blasio. Hoy es el último día en que puede completar el censo. De alguna manera, el censo es más importante que la elección porque solamente ocurre una vez cada 10 años. El censo es muy importante para todos nosotros porque es solo con el censo que obtenemos dinero de gobierno federal para escuelas, hospitales, calles, trenes, viviendas, hospitales y muchas más. Además, el número de representantes que tenemos en el Congreso se basa en el censo, que incluye a los inmigrantes, todos los inmigrantes, con o sin papeles. La información del censo también se usa para planificar para las escuelas, recolección de basura, vacunas, incluir para COVID, todo lo que necesitamos. No hay preguntas sobre inmigración o ciudadanía y todos deben participar. El censo es completamente seguro. Su información no se puede compartir con la policía, ni con inmigración, ni con los tribunales. Los barrios que no participen recibirán menos dinero y menos representación, por lo que sus problemas no se resolverán. La participación en el censo es muy fácil. Visite my2020census.gov y complete las 10 preguntas en 10 minutos y estará completo. La fecha límite es esta noche. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Amir. Gracias. Así que como les acaba de compartir, Amir, súper importante que llenen esto. Es seguro, no pide información de inmigración, no es compartido con el gobierno. Esto es, como él dijo, básicamente para asegurar que los recursos que necesitamos para nuestras comunidades, para nuestras familias, para nuestras escuelas, sean de acuerdo al número de personas que contamos en Nueva York y en todo el país. Así que por favor complétenos. Aquí está el website my2020census.gov. El número es 844-330-2020. Lo pueden hacer en español. Okay, so I'm going to switch to English. Thank you so much. If you guys have any questions, si tienen preguntas, por favor pongan en los comentarios. Please put your questions in the comments. Thank you so much, Ahmed, for sharing this. I think more important than ever that we, in the last few hours, that we can do everything possible to remind people how safe and easy this is and how important this is going to be for the next 10 years. Okay, so we're going to get started. Just one moment. Thank you, Amit. Thank you so much. Okay, so want to get back to the speakers. So great to have everyone. Now we're going to go into another very important topic around, our financial health. We are in a pandemic. This has been quite the year. where we've had to adjust to a new normal, and get creative with how we support our families with what we have and what we're facing. The neighborhood support and how we've all come together for each other has been inspiring and moving. We've seen New Yorkers' resiliency manifest in such creative ways. A friend whose mom started creating beautiful and comfortable masks to bring additional income in. Another whose husband's business lost traction due to the pandemic. So she started creating content about cooking healthy as a means to share ways to save money. A dad volunteering their time to support other New Yorkers. And some like you, Patricia, use the time to write a book that will help others. Look, the holidays will be here before we know it. And if you're not working, something, Patricia, you like many others we have experienced, covering expenses could become a challenge. Share with us some of the things we can consider during this pandemic, to especially as we go into the holidays, and also what this time has also inspired in so many people.
Well, thank you again for including me. I'm so happy to be here and on this wonderful panel tonight. Let's see here. First of all, I would like us to take a moment. You asked about things we should be thinking about during this pandemic. Let's all pause for one moment and reflect on what a great job we're doing, all of us, in our own way, in our own families. Give ourselves a pat on the back. This has been a tough time, and look, we're here, and we're here to talk about it. So a little congratulations is in order. In other ways to think about this time, I'm thinking about it as a time of reset, like hit the reset button, right? It's a time when I'm trying to challenge my assumptions about the past and to look at things just a little bit differently. And I encourage others to do that as well. I know many of us are on overload, and particularly you with small children at home trying to homeschool. I can't imagine. I have one child and he's in college. I cannot imagine how I would have handled this. And oh, my hat goes off to you and my heart is with you knowing how much is going on. But if you can find a moment, any moment during one of these days or nights to stop and think, reflect about what you might be able to do differently. Is there something you want to learn, a skill that you've been wanting to develop, a book that you've been wanting to write like me? Is there any way during this time you can start to dream a little bit more about that and maybe take some steps towards it, whatever it may be? Maybe it could be a side hustle, as you spoke of the woman making the masks, or maybe it could be something that adds tremendous value to your community, even if it's a volunteer endeavor. But I would encourage folks to take a moment and rethink a little bit and think about their aspirations. When we were so busy before, running here and there and socializing and out and about, we really didn't have time. So let's do a little bit of that. You mentioned the holidays coming up, and I know that can be a hard time, but I want to remind us that we are gifts to our family. We are giving our time. We are giving our love. You are making meals. You are helping to educate your kids. Let's remember that we're gifts in and of ourselves, and that there are many ways that we can celebrate that don't necessarily have to involve quite as much money. And you can certainly be completely clear with friends and family about what you do and don't need at this time. So if you'd prefer a little contribution toward a college account, or you'd prefer just a few hours to yourself, can someone watch the kids? Whatever it is, this is a time to put it on the table and to be clear. And I want you to remember that you are giving your children priceless gifts right now. By being resilient, by being resourceful, you are teaching them things that they are going to carry into their futures. And it seems like a dark time, but I think it's an opportunity where we're all learning a lot. And I promise you, as long as your children are safe and you are well, whatever's happening will actually make them stronger in the long run. In terms of resources and ideas of things you can continue or consider, I know right now that those of you who have student loans, and I think that Junad or Jess may talk about this a little later, but there's under the CARES Act, the student loan payments are on pause right now, both the principal and interest. If you happen to have a little extra money and you can put it towards a student loan you have, that would go towards the principal right now. It's also a good time to ask your employer if you are employed. Employers right now through year end can contribute towards student loans, and they can write that off as a business expense and that is not taxable to you. That's a unique provision through year end. So try to chip away at that principle if you can. Ask your employer if they can help. The other thing I would suggest is call some of your service providers. Let them know you're having some challenges. Let them know you're considering other ways of doing business. Perhaps you can get some concessions on the bills that you're paying, whether it's the cable bill or it's the phone bill. And if you happen to have a little extra money right now, which I know is maybe not the case, but if you can think of things you're not spending money on, like the Metro card, or I don't know, getting your clothing ready for work, or whatever the case may be, if you're saving, if there's a few expenses that you no longer have, I would encourage you to think about saving that money and putting it in an emergency fund or something more future oriented. And I'll turn it now over back to you, Carolina.
Thank you, Patricia. And thank you for acknowledging. I think we always try during these town halls to acknowledge the incredible work that families are putting, the new normal they're adjusting to still. And I think we need to keep that in mind as an opportunity. And I love that gifts to ourselves. We're gifts to others, and indeed we are. And we're going to talk more about savings, but I want to kick it over to Nadia, because she has just been amazing with her children, and also like really being creative about what resources exist in the community to help sort of balance with the budget that she has during the pandemic to cover some of the bigger, harder expenses. So Nadia, could you share with us how you saved money on things like food to be able to cover bigger expenses and even smaller expenses like supplies, and also share with us some of the sort of journey you went through with resources you applied for you and your husband. So I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Catalina. um, yeah, this whole pandemic has been like a real big, like, whoa, what's going on? Really a lot of reflection that we needed to do. And before the pandemic happened, I was actually pregnant and my child was born at the end of January. So coming out of the hospital on maternity leave, I was just like, okay, what am I gonna do? I can't do anything. I don't know what's going on. The paid family leave was only 70% of my income, whatever I was receiving weekly. And it was like a whole big, my husband couldn't work. I was just like, what are we doing? I have 3 kids now. What's going to happen? So with my husband out of work, he was receiving workers' comp, but they were only giving him temporarily, like limited amounts. So that was just like, okay, we need to figure something out. I did find out from his lawyer that he can apply for unemployment. So unemployment helped us get income on that level as well. So that was able to help pay for our rent and our phone bill, our utilities, like as far as internet and cable and so forth. I did have to call cable and tell them to cut some services down as well, because a lot of the channels we weren't even watching. It was more of Netflix and stuff like that. So um, but yeah, the whole pandemic, it did brought a lot of the community together. I realized how blessed I am to be in the story houses. They were able to they were knocking on our doors, giving us food. I was like, okay, thank you. And they were giving us masks. We didn't know we can leave the house, so they just came to our house and they was giving us the mask. They were giving us hand sanitizers, gloves, and at that whole same time, there was no no supplies in the supermarkets. There was no supplies of of paper towels. There was no supplies of toilet tissue. It was like a hot commodity for everything. And so I was really blessed that Astoria houses did come knock on our door for these supplies and so forth. As well, I was working at a food pantry. They would call me and like, hey, Nadia, do you need some food? So they would deliver food pantry all the way from Upper West Side to come to me just on a monthly basis. And my daughter, her school had Brighter Bites program, and they would come every Thursday. It came to a point where I was like, I had so much fruits and vegetables. I didn't even know what to do with some of these things. So, and I couldn't really cook. I was on maternity leave, so my husband had to do a lot of stuff. So it was just like, okay, let's chop up some potatoes and carrots. Here you go, guys. But yeah, it was very interesting. For this whole pandemic. I did apply for food stamps as well. And that whole time we were waiting, I was just like, I'm very blessed that we have all of these pantries and the story houses and Brighter Bites because it took about 30 days for the for the food stamps to kick in. So we didn't have no way of getting food. So I do have food stamps with that. By the end of the 30 days. It was like 30 days. So by March, April, whatever, I started getting food stamps. So thank God for that. Um,
That's
and
amazing, Nadia. I
yeah,
think the food pantries have been like
it's such a
such an
blessing.
important resource.
Yeah,
Yeah, the volunteers, the food, and you've seen these pantries. It's fresh food,
yeah. Fresh fruit,
healthy food,
produce, everything. It was,
produce. And I think that's sort of another resource and a reminder that if it's possible to be able to save money on food and even applying for SNAP, and we'll talk a little bit more about the resources available through with Jess, let's take advantage of that because this is gonna, whatever help we can get, it's more peace of mind. You're not
al-
alone in this.
also,
Um,
I just wanted to mention also WIC because I did have a child that I had the WIC program that was able to give us extra like $11 for fruits and vegetables and milk and eggs and bread. And I was just like, what? This is amazing.
And I'm sure that like gave you so much more peace of mind, especially, after just having a baby and
Yeah.
also a husband, not working, and 3 kids at this point. It's
Yeah.
in a shutdown is not probably the easiest thing ever.
No.
So thank you for sharing all of that, Nadia. And just I want to dive in deeper into the resources that the city makes available through financial empowerment centers. And because I think the other thing we've learned is that some of us, myself included, we need to be better about financial planning. And there are resources, amazing resources available in the city. So give us the 311 on what the financial empowerment centers are, what they do, how people can access them.
Yeah, thank you, Carolina. And yeah, like finances are tricky. Finances are difficult, right? It's like we could all use a hand with our finances. So I want to tell you about a free resource, which is the New York City Financial Empowerment Centers. We offer free, professional, confidential, one-on-one financial counseling and coaching. Before the pandemic, we were very proud to say that we had 34 locations in all 5 boroughs. We took very great care to make sure that they're, in the communities that really need them. We have several locations in Queens, of which one of whom is manned by our friend Janed. Only 2 of our locations right now are actually open for in-person services, and those are way up in the Bronx, so probably not too close by to most of the folks that are joining in this town hall. But I am happy to say that all of our counselors are working remotely, so we have all of our appointment availability, and we can help you over the phone completely safely. So what is financial counseling, right? It's basically, financial counselors can help you with just about anything regarding your personal finances, right? So a lot of folks here are struggling with budgeting, like what Patricia was talking about, and Nadia was talking about, especially when you experience a change in income or an income shock, or, maybe your expenses change a little bit. The financial counselors can help you manage those changes in your income and come up with a budget or spending plan that works for you. So in terms of credit, for example, a lot of folks want to improve their credit score, or maybe you don't have credit and you'd like to establish credit. All the financial counselors are experts in analyzing credit reports, and they can help you improve your credit score. Or establish credit if you don't have credit right now. A lot of folks might be dealing with some debt. We touched on student loans a little bit. Financial counselors can help you make a plan for paying down your debt. for strategizing how to deal with it, especially when it comes to student loans, right? Patricia was mentioning there's a lot of options that are available to borrowers, and a lot of things that have changed a little bit and will be changing at the end of this year. But if you've had a reduction in income, or an increase in your family or change in your household size, you can apply for what's called an IDR, an income-driven repayment plan, to potentially lower your monthly payment, or even stop your monthly payments. And a financial counselor at a financial empowerment center can help you navigate that process and contact your lenders, or send letters to your lenders to request an adjustment in your payment, or perhaps pausing your payment. When it comes to banking, a lot of folks, may not trust the bank so much, or may not have a bank account, or have one that you don't really use that's not really working for you. The financial counselors can help you identify safe and affordable financial products, bank accounts, checking accounts, savings accounts that work for you, and your budget and your needs. So when it comes to, and this is really important, right? Because right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, like not all of the banks are open, going in person for services, getting your benefits, or getting your paycheck. It's so much easier if you can get direct deposit and do all of that stuff electronically, especially with when it comes to the stimulus payments, for example. A lot of folks, it was taking a very long time for those checks to be mailed. If you had direct deposit set up, you get your money, your stimulus check or your economic impact payment much faster. And the Financial Empowerment Center counselors can help you get that set up and help you navigate the IRS website to get your direct deposit for your stimulus payments set up. I do want to mention here real quick that financial counselors do not help you file your taxes, but the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection runs the NYC Free Tax Prep program, where you can get your taxes done for free. And they can help you either file your taxes to make sure that you qualify for that stimulus payment, or if you normally don't file taxes, there's an additional form that the tax providers can help you fill out to make sure you get that extra payment for, a dependent. So just want to make sure that everybody's available of those two resources.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then,
yeah.
I know I'm
go
probably
ahead.
running out of time, but the other thing that I really wanted to mention is that this service is free. Again, it's one-on-one. It's not a class. It's you speaking with a financial counselor, might even be our friend Jeanette. And it's open to anybody who lives or works in New York City that is 18 years or older. There's no income restrictions. There is no immigration restrictions. It is completely confidential, just like the census. None of your information goes to any other city agencies or any other government entity. It's one-on-one you with a counselor. And so I just really want to stress that it's free and it's open to anybody in New York City, regardless of income or immigration status. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Jess. And also, these folks are trained. They're used to dealing, with crisis situations.
Mm-hmm. Yep, all of the counselors are certified, and then we provide ongoing, training and professional development. And yeah, you had asked me a question about how did we prepare the financial counselors for the pandemic. And I mean, of course, we're still providing training and resources and, thinking about, all of just the collective trauma that we're experiencing, as a city, as a country, dealing with those types of things. But, I did want to say that, our counselors, this is, folks who are experiencing an acute financial issue or in financial crisis. This is nothing new to us. We've the entire time that we've had the financial empowerment centers, which is about 10 years now, we've always worked with clients who have been, in rental arrears or, experiencing some type of crisis. So our financial counselors were, nobody was prepared for the pandemic, but I think out of everybody, our financial counselors probably were in terms of like the work that they're doing to help their clients. So,
and they speak multiple languages. So and we're going to go to Jeanette shortly. I think you speak Bengali, and there's folks that speak Spanish and several other languages. You would be able to access these services, in the language that you prefer for the most part. So we'll share the links in the comments, and we'll show it in the screen later. But now I want to thank you, Jess. And now I want to turn it over to Jeanette, because I want to get into some of the details of what it means. Like once you're basically what a one-on-one looks like, creating the budget, what are things people can do regularly, what can they consider? So enlighten us.
Thank you, Carolina, for having me. And thank you, Jess, for the kind words. What we tend to do in terms of when we do sit down with a client one-on-one in a confidential session is we dive into their budget/spending plan in terms of how much income they're bringing in and what their expenses lie. Obviously, we've been going through a lot in terms of since the middle of March, millions of Americans have been filing for unemployment. People have been furloughed, working from home. Obviously, their income may have changed or whatnot. Stimulus checks were presented to people who are eligible for stimulus economic impact payments as well. Like Jess was saying, in terms of receiving your stimulus payment, it was a lot easier if you had direct deposit. I actually live next to a TD bank, and I've seen maybe 25 to 50 people that were waiting online just to deposit their stimulus paper checks. So it was a lot easier for people who had a bank account. And people sometimes are very timid about putting their money in the bank, but rest be assured that when you sit down with a financial counselor for a one-on-one session, we could look for an account, a bank that's convenient to you, somewhere where you live or somewhere where you work, and we can set out to see the services that that you are satisfied with. In terms of when we do sit down doing the one-on-one spending plan / budget, what we tend to look at are hard and soft expenses. And if Cormac can share that with, awesome, thank you. So what are hard expenses, right? Hard expenses are things that are necessary, things that we need. You obviously want to make sure that you have your rent or mortgage, paid on time. You want to make sure you have a roof over your head. So that's a hard expense you want to take care of. Obviously, utilities such as electricity, gas, food. You want to make sure that you have enough money for your family in terms of lunch, dinner, wherever the case is. Obviously, a lot more people are probably cooking and eating at home rather than taking out these days. What are soft expenses? What we call them maybe luxury, things that we may not need, but we kind of go online and buy things, such as things like we could have a perfectly working TV, but we might go out and buy a new TV, right? So we try to signify the difference between hard and soft expenses. Maybe you go out and have confidence you want to go buy a lazy boy chair, but you may not be financially fit enough in terms of having enough money to pay for that lazy boy chair. Obviously, I know the iPhone 12 Pro came out today, and people are probably excited in terms of purchasing that item. But what we can do is sit down and on our Excel sheet and figure out if we have the savings or even the income capacity to afford those payments. So what we try to signify is, what do we really need and what do we kind of want, right? A need and a want is a major difference. And during these tough times, we want to make sure that at least our needs are taken care of. And if the stuff that we want, we can build up a savings fund and eventually buy those things as well. So that's what I try to convey to my clients. In terms of, and we could take that off the screen for now. Thank you very much, Cormac. In terms of how do we keep track of our expenses? Obviously, we're creatures of habit with our cell phones. So there's tons of apps that we can use in terms of keeping track of our expenses. We can use, I'm an Android person, so I can use the Samsung Notes and write down everything I spent today and keep a tab of how much I've actually spent. Or if you're into writing in a memo pad, that's perfectly fine too. Sometimes writing things down, it helps your memory in terms of how much you actually spent. So, whatever works for you in terms of either using your smartphone or using a memo pad, or even the Google Sheets is a good way. It adds up everything as you input it. And Google Sheets also has an app that you can use on your smartphone as well. So I feel like that's convenient as well. What Patricia was mentioning in terms of maybe reducing expenses that during this COVID crisis, gyms did open up in a limited capacity in September. But if you feel like, hey, I'm not ready to go back to my gym for safety concerns or whatnot, you can contact your gym and say, hey, is there any way I could defer my time period for the gym, maybe start back in January or whatnot, or even if they're willing to cancel your membership without any fees or whatnot, you can contact them as well. Most of us are probably working from home, so things that we can keep track of in terms of expenses, we're not really using a MetroCard as much, so maybe that could lead to a savings on the positive side. And other ways to maybe reduce expenses can be if you're looking at your bills and you see you're not using your cable as much as before, or the cable bill is really causing damage to your budget, maybe you contact your service provider, your cable company, and see if there's any promotions out there, any ways to reduce your monthly bill or whatnot. I'm not telling you to play Pictionary with your family every day and not watch TV, but there are definitely ways to maybe reduce the fees on your cable bill in terms of watching television or even streaming. Obviously, in terms of the stimulus payments, not everyone is eligible, but there are ways to check if you are eligible or not. There is an IRS website, and when you do meet with a financial counselor one-on-one, we can tell you to see if you're interested, to see if you're eligible for that payment. You may be eligible, you may be not, but it's best to know why leave money on the table. That might be there. I'm sure any of us will take $1,200 if we're eligible for it. You know what I mean?
Thank you for sharing all of that. And I think the other piece that Patricia mentioned earlier, and we're going to talk a little more around savings, if possible, is if folks haven't filed taxes, they still can. And just mentioned that there are resources to file your taxes for free. So there may be money on the table, as Jeanette said, that you can take advantage of. And also, right, Jeanette, in the one-on-one interview, in the one-on-one appointments, you also look at ways to also potentially start saving a little bit.
Correct. If you haven't felt like you had the resources to save, let's say over the last 5 to 10 years, it's hard to start saying to yourself or to your family, hey, let's start saving $500 starting in November, right? What we try to strategize in terms of what we do meet with clients is try to come up with small, realistic goals in the beginning. So maybe that goal might be in November after we do the complete budget with you in terms of the cash analysis or whatnot. How much money are we putting towards maybe an emergency fund or even towards a 529 plan or whatnot? We could start out with a small goal of maybe $20 in November, see how things go, and then revisit the budget in December and see how much is left or whatnot.
And that's the great thing about, sorry to interrupt, the great thing about the financial counselors, that you can see them as often as needed. And so if your circumstances change, and you wanted to save, but the next month you can't, that's okay. And that's why they're there, to help guide you.
Yeah, absolutely. During our sessions, it's confidential. It's judgment proof. We don't pass any judgment towards any of our clients. It's obviously sometimes financials are very sensitive, so you may not feel the need to maybe talk to a perfect stranger when you first meet us in terms of sharing everything. But as time, trust will be developed.
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit more about the savings, because the stimulus check was something that helped so many, and it also was money that folks didn't count on as well. And so Nadia, I want you to share the story of how not only that you use the money to take care of immediate needs, especially with children who are constantly growing, but also how you've used that money as an opportunity to financially empower them.
Yeah, so the stimulus came and I didn't want to spend everything. I was just like, I know a lot was going on. So I kind of like sat back, looked at things. I do remember like, hey, New York City, New York Kids Rise has an account with the savings. And I said, okay, let me finish these building blocks for my daughter. And then I saw 529 come up and I was like, okay, let me set up account for them since I'm sitting here, I have nothing else to do. So I started going through that, and I decided to put $50 in each of their accounts. I just did a one-time thing because I wasn't too sure on how um, how much of other expenses was needed. So I said, let's just start it off with $50. In each of their 529s, I have two kids. One is in seventh grade and the other is in third grade. So I wish that I had this program for my seventh grader to start with the Kids Rise and the 529. But for him, it's just the 529. So at least I started something for him. And they were growing rapidly through this whole pandemic. So I ordered some clothes for my son, but they didn't fit him. So I said, okay, we have to reevaluate this. So what I did was also I donated some of the other clothes to my other relatives, and I had to buy him some more clothes. He gained like 20 pounds through this whole pandemic. My daughter, she went to 2 sizes. She was a size 8. Now she's like 10, 12. So I had to order them a whole bunch of clothes and shoes as well. And they're not like not they're very expensive in their size. And I also decided to open their savings, their own account. So they have their own checking account with Capital One. And I started them each off of $20. And I also gave them an allowance based off their age. So my son is 13, he gets $13. Well, actually at that time he was 12. So each year they get a dollar raise.
That's great.
And my daughter's 8, so she gets $8 every time I get paid. So I'll get paid biweekly, so that's what they would get. And that also motivated them to do their chores. If they didn't do their chores, I would deduct a dollar or 25 cents. If they wanted to gain extra money, I would give them like worksheets um, to like for homework assignments, just to give them worksheets just to keep growing their brains. And I'll tell them, okay, each page that you complete, that's 5 cents. If you can complete up to 20 pages, like, basically you get about $2 worth for the next 2 weeks. Who knows? So yeah, they were really enthusiastic with that. They also wanted to buy a lot of stuff. They now have access to Amazon and Target. My daughter loves to go on. So this also teaches them how how much money they want to save to put aside, or how much money um, they want to spend. So they have two options. And based on their options, I was thinking maybe I can like the money that they save, how I'll let them know, okay, you can either put that money towards your college fund, add on to that 529 account, or you can save it to something that you want really big that's expensive. And these kids are these kids watch too much YouTube now, so their imaginations is very wild. So yeah, that's I rather them. I was talking to my husband. I said I rather you guys, I rather them make their mistakes now than when they get to that point where they actually get their own job and have their own money, where they know what's the difference between a want and a need. Because it's really hard. Like a lot of kids don't get taught that. I know I was fortunate to be taught that because my mother wasn't. She was an administrative. She was into finance and stuff like that. So I was taught that. My husband, he has no clue about any of that. So he's another person I also give him advice on what's a want and a need. So it's very important. Like Judith said.
That is so wonderful. I mean, and that also, that's great. That's something great that your own mom was able to pass down on, and not all of us have that. And I think what you said about letting them make mistakes now, like they're safe right now to do that, and so they'll be better prepared to understand the differences between needs and wants and hard expenses, soft expenses. And really being intentional about the decisions they make. And I wanted to mention that, as part of the program, as part of the NYC Kids Rise Save for College program, students are not only enrolled with a 529 plan with money for their future, but they also are participating in financial lessons in their school as part of the program, so that they can start grasping the concept of savings, expensive, and going to college in ways that are age appropriate. It's really something wonderful that the teachers at the schools in the program are doing. And this complements very nicely with what you're doing at home, Nadia, because then, they're sort of getting all of this through different, from in the home and also at school. And I just want to mention one other thing about the program is that it also creates opportunities for families to start their own savings, like Nadia just mentioned. So not only do they have the 529 plan with the initial C that they get as part of being in the program, but they also have access to college saving account options. And that means that there's opportunities as well for families to start their own savings and not be alone in this journey. So that can include support from champions, during the holidays, and Patricia will share some of that and from the community. And the Astoria Houses Tenants Association, actually led by Ms. Coker, is actually raising $1,000 for each student in the program that lives in Astoria Houses. So they're going to have $1,000 plus whatever it's already in their accounts that they will be able to apply towards college in the future, or career training. So this is all really great, right? Because we're dealing with expenses, we're dealing with so many different circumstances. So everyone should do what makes sense. And that's where the financial counselors are incredibly helpful, because they will make sure that they are creating plans with you that work for you. And if there's an opportunity to save, they'll help identify those opportunities. So I want to pivot to Patricia. You know, we're going to fast forward to the future, because your son is in college, and a big factor in this accomplishment was the savings that you did little by little throughout his childhood. And, you know, I think there's something so important about having time on your side. And as many families do right now with, you know, if you start the moment they're starting kindergarten, or if they're going into first, second, third grade, whatever grade, you know, they're taking advantage of having that time. So tell us more about your experience, how you went about starting your savings for your son's future education.
Sure. Well, I had the opportunity to be working with 529 plans back in the late 1990s when they were first launched. I was pregnant with my son while I was designing two of the earliest plans that there were in the country. I decided, because my husband and I had over $100,000 in student loan debt, I decided, together with my husband, there was no way we wanted our child to go through the stress that we went through. We both came from low-income backgrounds. We were delighted to have received higher education and the many doors it opened, but we were also very much weighed down by the debt. So I made a decision when I went back from maternity leave. I had no idea how I would be able to do this, but I made a decision that I was going to take a little bit out of each paycheck. I figured if it didn't cross my hands, perhaps I wouldn't have to make the decision each time whether it went into the account or not. So I began to do that in very small ways back in 1999. I continued to do it through all sorts of life events. I was an employee in the World Trade Center on September 11th. I was at my desk when all that began. I lived through that situation emotionally, financially, through the market correction of 2008. And in 2016, my dear mom, her health began to decline. And I saw her through the end of her life, but that involved my stepping away from work for a bit and my taking on some added responsibilities for my brother, who has developmental disabilities. At the same time, after returning from a short leave of taking care of that, I lost my job. My firm exited the line of business I was managing, and I was deep in grief over the loss of my mom, overwhelmed with some new responsibilities of helping my brother develop independence, and now without work. Fortunately, that was my son's senior year of high school. Had I not started saving when he was an infant, his outcome would have been very different. And we were very prepared for the future. And I got to tell you, with all that stress on me, this was one less bit of stress I had. And I'm so happy. I cannot tell families enough how happy I am to have made those steps. There are so many bumps in the road. I hope most of you will have fewer than I've had, but I've had a lot. But having a plan really makes a difference, and having started really makes a difference, because it puts you in a position of strength. So he has now gone on to college. He had options about which college to select. He's pursuing a major that he's interested in. He's able to do things like study abroad, take on volunteer opportunities, take an unpaid internship. He couldn't do that. I could have never done that as a young person, but because we were prepared, he's got more options. And he wrote the foreword to this book that I have just published. He wrote the foreword to say what he learned as a child in a family where we were preparing for his future. And he's learned a lot. He knows how to approach situations that seem unsurmountable. He knows to do it a little at a time, and he knows that persistence pays off, and it's what we do every day that impacts the future. So I'm very proud. I can't say enough about, he'll be graduating debt-free. It wasn't all from the 529 account. He got some merit aid. We pieced together some things. He worked, of course, too, but that is a huge achievement, and it's very doable. At least preparing in some way is doable. No matter what you save, is that much less your child will have to repay with interest later on. And you are teaching them the most valuable of skills. So I can't say enough about my savings journey, how proud I am of myself as we're patting ourselves on the back, and of my son. So that's a bit about me. And I do want to say, get those accounts opened, even if you don't feel you can contribute much. Get it open, put a little bit in at a time, and then tell friends and family that this is your mission, and let them contribute instead of the little things that they buy that add up that you don't really need. And the last tip I have is, if you happen to be employed, tell your employer you are saving for college. There are ways that employers can contribute to your college accounts, and they're beginning to do so more and more. Ask the question. If you can get your employer to match a little bit, even better. But I wish you all success on your journey, and I feel very pleased about what mine has been.
Thank you, Patricia. And again, like we are not fortune tellers, so we can't tell the future, but anything that we can do to prepare, even if it's a little bit, and by a little bit means that you can open something with $1, and then, maybe in one given month, it could be $5, or when you file your taxes, you can split the refund, or during the holidays, you can ask, instead of 2 toys for your child, how about 1 toy and then the other contribution towards their college savings? So there are many. Go ahead.
I just thought of one more thing that I tell families. When the child gets out of diapers, that's a huge point of celebration for so many reasons. But most families spend $50 or $60 a month on those diapers, the wipes, and the creams. If you put $50 or $60 away for those next 15 or 16 years, depending on when the potty training occurred, you can have like over $17,000 with like a 5% rate of return. I think that's incredible, but people don't think that way. Think about where you suddenly don't have an expense and what you can do with that money. So think about $15,000 or more, as you're celebrating the potty training, think about that money that you can save.
And you have, 10 plus years, right? Depending on when you start. So again, this is where like time on your side is really going to be a benefit, and really tapping into the community, the support, the resources like Jeanette and the financial empowerment centers, and whether doesn't matter what your situation is at this time, if you're unemployed or if you are working or if you have limited income. I think there's something I want you to sort of underscore here around the stigma sometimes around talking about finances. Because I think that's really important to sort of highlight, because, there's no shame in, going through difficult times.
Yeah. And just echoing what Jeanette said earlier, that this is a judgment-free zone, like 100% it's a judgment-free zone, and it's, even though, we might be like a perfect stranger to you, like that's what we're here to do. And sometimes it's easier to talk to, somebody that you're just meeting, that, because they're not your partner, they're not your family member, right? Like they don't have, Jeanette doesn't have an emotional connection to how you spend your money, whereas like, people that you live with might, right? So when you go to Jeanette or one of the counselors, like, again, it's completely judgment free. Like there's a lot of stigma and shame that surrounds like personal finances. We don't like to talk about it all that much, but when you come to us, like you can speak freely, right? And, and just know, like again, like the counselor's not going to judge you at all. I mean, I can't tell you, when I used to be a financial counselor myself, how many times clients would tell me after we finished our session, oh my God, I almost didn't come today because I was worried that you were going to yell at me or that I was going to feel bad. And, I was making stupid decisions with my money, but, you made me feel comfortable and like, you didn't judge me. And, that's always such a gratifying feeling to have somebody tell you that after the session. But I really want to make sure that we're telling people that before you go to your session, that you have nothing to be afraid of. It's very important to like, use somebody who's an independent, third party who's not already tied into your finances, who can really sort of take a bird's eye view and give you the steps that you need to reach your goals. And it is especially important now these days because again, like we were talking about, in an economic crisis, there are scams left and right. There's predatory program, there's products left and right. It's really important that you're getting like trusted, objective advice about what's best for you and your family in this situation.
So I want to show some of the resources that you mentioned earlier, and also have a flyer that so this is the website that we put on the comments. So nyc.gov/talkmoney. This is where you can make the appointment. You can pick your language. Also here is the flyer from Jeanette. We'll put his email address and phone number in the comments, so you can reach out to him. We're running out of time. We're a little over, so I just want to wrap up with some final words on, something that has helped you during this time, a word or a phrase or something that can just leave others inspired or empowered. So Patricia, let's start with you.
I would say mindset. Just reframe the situation and look for the best in it. There's some really good things happening now that maybe you're not realizing. So keep your perspective on what is good in the situation and keep your eye on the future. It's going to come no matter what.
Jeanette? You're on mute. There you go.
I want to say time. This is probably. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to say time when we may never have this much free time ever again. You know what I mean? So anything you feel like you wanted to do in the past, you could try to take care of it now. And that can maybe be financial planning. You know what I mean? It's by you making the first step and making an appointment. That's a big step, and that's with you attending the session. We can definitely identify short-term and long-term goals.
Jess?
I think Patricia, you kind of took mine. I had mindset in what I wrote. But what's been helpful for me is that we sort of entered this pandemic thinking that okay, it's going to be a few weeks, maybe a couple months, and then everything's going to go back to normal. We now know having accepting the reality that things are not going back to normal anytime soon has been helpful for me. Not in the sense that we're necessarily mourning how things used to be, but thinking about how can I adapt to the situation and make the things that that are unpleasant, maybe a little bit more pleasant, or take, even if it's little things, instead of wanting to go back to the office because, we miss our colleagues. It's what's the little thing that I can change in my home setup to make things easier and more pleasant for myself. So just getting out of the mindset that okay, it's just the curtain's going to be lifted and everything's going back to normal, to just think, what are the changes in the ways that I can adapt and the systems that I can implement and the supports that I can put in there for myself and my community for the long haul.
Thank you. Nadia?
My word is hopeful. I just want to, very hopeful that they have so many resources out there. All you have to do is whatever you feel that you're struggling in. Google is a good resource. You just Google whatever and certain things will pop up. But yeah, just being very hopeful on the situation, and don't, stress too much. Everything will work.
These are all great. I would add, ask for help and, ask questions. Have you heard about this? Do you know where I can get that? Do you know who's doing this? And, enjoy the wins that you have at any moment in the day or the week or the month. Enjoy them. No matter what happened, enjoy them. And speaking of resources, we're going to wrap up now, but I just want to give a heads up that we have these workshops coming up. The My Kid is Going to College workshop. We've sent emails around. They're listed on our website on nyckidsrise.org/events. But the My Kid is Going to College is going to speak to some of the things that Patricia mentioned around the different funding resources in colleges and how the program fits into the program, how the savings fits into your planning for the future. And also we have Choose the Right Account. We have 2 accounts options within the Save for College program if families are able to start their own savings, and we go through in detail what the differences are between those 2, so that you can decide what is best for you. We're doing these in English, Spanish, and Bangla. So keep an eye out for our emails or social media posts, and go on our website and register. And finally, if you haven't completed the building blocks, please give us a call or email us during these unprecedented times. The building blocks are steps you can take today to support your child's future. Here's our number, 833-543-7473. We speak multiple languages. You can email us as well. If you're not following us on the other social media platforms, please do so. I want to thank you all for joining. And thanks to Nadia, Jess, Jeanette, and Patricia for sharing such valuable information. It's been really wonderful to connect and exchange ideas and expertise. For those watching, please have a great night and tune in next month on Thursday, November 19th. Have a